Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
And welcome to All Indiana Politics now, just 2 weeks before the election, and we focus on two major races in the state. First, the 5th District congressional race to replace Susan Brooks in the U.S. House. It's one of the most closely watched campaigns in the country, drawing millions of dollars in spending. And we talked this morning with Victoria Spartz, the Republican state lawmaker who won a 15-person primary earlier this year. Victoria Spartz, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We appreciate you taking some time. We'll start off with health care. You say it's one of your #1 priorities. Why?
Well, because I think it's extremely important for us to look at our health care and health care costs. It became a wage suppression. It became a problem for businesses to be able to advance. It became a problem for consumers to have access to quality health care. We have hyperinflation of price of health care. In the last 20 years, it's out of control. We have less and less access to good quality, and we have more and more money spent on health care. So it's unacceptable. It's really an issue of survival of our middle class, and also an issue for our people that want to move into middle class, to have good health care for their families and children, to be able to advance and grow their businesses and families. It became a significant issue. It's been an issue for a while, but bad solutions to bad problems made it even worse. And now we have all problems we had on steroids. And I think we just have to have the guts and deal with that.
You've gone on record and said that large monopolies are hurting patients, specifically when talking about health care. Would you include Anthem and Lilly as a part of those?
Well, everything right now, if you look at every part of the market, whether insurance market, whether it's prescription benefit managers, whether it's pharma market, whether it's hospital market, is controlled by large oligopolies. Monopolies, right? If you have several of them, it's oligopoly. And I think that's a problem with more and more barriers to entry. So if you think about it, how can you deliver value? To deliver value in any industry, whether it's energy, whether it's education, whether it's healthcare, you have to have competition. Monopoly power restrict competition, so you have increase in prices and decrease in value. And that is a very normal thing. But the problem—
I just want to jump in real quick because we have a lot to get to, though. Would you say that Lilly and Anthem bears responsibility for the costs?
Well, I don't think they bear responsibility. They are on the market and they will play for the rules of the markets. But if we create an environment when all larger players can survive, they become more powerful. But that's not their fault. They're not natural monopolies. But when the government creates rules and regulations that only big companies can survive, and now we have big monopolies fighting with each other, that is actually our fault, that what we create, that small companies cannot enter that market and compete with them. Every business will adjust to the rules, and every business will play by those rules. But if we set up bad rules, they will create bad incentives and bad results. So that's not their fault. It's a fault of our governmental system.
The Affordable Care Act is something that you say should be overturned. Do you have a plan to replace it?
Well, it's not even Affordable Care Act should be overturned. We need to have a plan that actually can deliver value to consumers. What happened, we had issues, and President Obama met with every special interest group and asked, what do you want? And they wrote what they wanted. They didn't even know. If you remember, Nancy Pelosi didn't even know what in there. So we're now spending billions of dollars. They're subsidizing for every additional insurance. It costs us over $400,000. We're piling up the debt. Insurance premiums are going up. Networks are getting reduced. We create more and higher deductible and less access to good medical care if you get sick. That's unacceptable. So we have to look. We had problems. The only good thing about Affordable Care Act that it actually put issues on steroids and all of the problems, and now maybe we can have a serious discussion. So we do have a plan. I actually wrote a bill, 3317 at the state level, that kind of push a little bit, some of the reforms at the state level, and we passed some reforms. It's very difficult to do it at one time, but 85% of healthcare is controlled at the federal level.
You mentioned Nancy Pelosi. Your competition you have said will be a puppet for Nancy Pelosi. How can you assure voters that you won't be a puppet for Mitch McConnell?
Well, I can tell you one thing, I have always been known in my Republican Party to be independent legislator. I never been known to be controlled by the establishment of my party. And we had a very competitive race with 15 people. I wasn't chosen by the leadership of my party because I am, as a legislator, check and balance, regardless if my governor is Democrat or Republican, regardless if my president is Democrat or Republican. I don't represent the party, I don't represent the government. I represent the people, and I have to serve the people. And I've always been like that. And if I could agree, on some issues, I depart with my Democrat colleagues. I work with teachers' union on some issues where it's not, very typical thing to do for a Republican. I work with juvenile judges and public defenders on some of the criminal justice issues. Not typical thing for a Republican to do. And I work with some of my colleagues on the other side because I understand it's an issue we need to work on.
I have about 90 seconds. I want to get two more questions in here. You talked about the debt. You're for cutting taxes. How are we going to pay down the debt if you're cutting taxes? The math doesn't work out there.
Well, we have to. Everyone, I'm a CPA, and I understand there are two parts to the income statement: revenue and expenditures. And no one ever deals with expenditures. And if we don't deal with expenditures, we can tax everyone and take all of the money. We'll never be able to pay out this debt. But if you think about the amount of money we've spent $100,000 per person on Medicaid. We spent $50,000 per child in Department of Child Services. I said, only 5-10 grand go to the child of families. 40,000 goes no one knows where. I said, we can send people to Harvard Business School for 50 grand a year. So we have to utilize efficiency and reform these programs because we have to have effective safety nets. We need to make sure that we protect our seniors and have Social Security and Medicare we promised to them. We have to make sure that we have good long-term care, that people don't die in nursing homes. But we need to make these programs better and efficient, not to a ton of more, and everything is all over the place.
Quick answer on this one.
Yes.
Would you vote to repeal or keep the Trump tax cuts?
I think the Trump cuts is good. If you can see the economy, it affected small businesses good. I think we can do even more for small businesses. There are still some loopholes that we can address, for larger businesses, but I think it's important to keep low tax environment.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Victoria Spartz, thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And next Sunday, we sit down with Democratic 5th District candidate Christina Hale. That's at 9:30 on Wish TV and our statewide news network. Coming up, picking Indiana's next chief legal officer, the Democrat hoping to notch the party's first win for Attorney General in more than 2 decades. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics. We promised coverage of 2 major Indiana races today. The second is the campaign for Attorney General. Democrat Jonathan Weinzapfel, a former state lawmaker and former mayor of Evansville, hopes he'll be the first Democrat elected Attorney General since 1996. Time now to welcome in Jonathan Weinzaffel. Jonathan, thank you very much for being here, sir.
Great to be here. Thank you.
First and foremost, let's talk about your campaign, because health care is a huge topic, the Affordable Care Act specifically.
Right.
You say that if you win, you want to address the Supreme Court, the lawsuit, take Indiana out of that lawsuit. Why?
Absolutely. On day one, I think my job as Attorney General is to protect people's health care. And there's so much at stake if the ACA is found unconstitutional. So everything from people with pre-existing conditions, whether it's diabetes, high blood pressure, a positive test for coronavirus. If Todd Rokita is successful in overturning the ACA, these are folks who can have a very difficult time finding insurance or having to spend exorbitant amounts of money to get it. In addition, if the ACA is unconstitutional, there are 550,000 Hoosiers that have received health care through the expansion of the Healthy Indiana Plan, which was put together under then Governor Mitch Daniels, expanded under Mike Pence, and here we are with our Attorney General in office and the wannabe, Republican wannabe, who, if they're successful, these are folks who are going to all of a sudden be scrambling to find insurance. In addition, folks who bought insurance on the exchange, another 150,000 Hoosiers. So, and this is, think about this in the middle of a pandemic where the Indianapolis Business Journal just last Friday was talking about 1 million Hoosiers losing their work or having to find additional work, but losing their employment-based health insurance. These are all folks going to be scrambling to protect their families. And if the ACA is unconstitutional, as Todd Rokita wants, they're going to be scrambling, and people are going to be desperate, and it's going to have a huge negative impact on our economy.
So if it is overturned, how do you want to try to protect people with pre-existing conditions?
Well, if it's overturned, then we're going to have to look to Congress once again to provide those protections. You know, and all these protections were inherent in the Affordable Care Act. And so, you know, Todd Rokita voted more than 50 times as a member of Congress to kill the ACA without having any type of replacement. And so today he's talking about he wants to protect people with pre-existing conditions. Well, he had his chance. He has spoken. And he also supports this lawsuit which would overturn the ACA and obviously deny protections for people with pre-existing conditions. So you can't have it both ways. Hoosiers are smarter than that, and they see through it.
You have gone on record and said that criminal justice, the way it is now, is unfair. In what sense, and what do you plan to do about it?
Well, Indiana has one of the higher incarceration rates in the country. And what I think the opportunity that's presented to us, especially with the shooting of George Floyd, is an opportunity to reshape how we conduct criminal justice here in Indiana. For example, one of the things that I've talked about is the need to decriminalize marijuana. I like what the county prosecutor, Ryan Mears, is doing here in Indiana. I think that is policy that could be extended, should be extended on a statewide basis, and especially the people who are using marijuana for medicinal purposes. Why would we be throwing veterans in jail who are using it for PTSD, or people with a terminal illness who are using marijuana to take care of some of the pain that they're experiencing? Why wouldn't we make it available for medicinal purposes and make sure that our laws are rational and keep up with what's happening throughout the country? So there are a lot of aspects of criminal justice. I mean, you know, I travel throughout the state, and you know, it seems like every county is looking to expand or build new jail space. And you know, it seems to me that there's a smarter, better way. We can keep folks safe. First and foremost, we have to make sure we're protecting individuals and communities. But it seems to me we can make a criminal justice more fair, that makes sure that people who are nonviolent offenders have an opportunity to get the treatment they need and remain taxpayers instead of basically going into jail and basically where we're supporting them instead. So I think there's some dramatic changes we can make that's going to make it more fair and more just for everybody.
I have read that you support voting absentee by mail.
Yes.
How could you make that possible come 2022?
Well, moving forward, it's going to take an act of the legislature. What made sense to me is that in the primary, Republicans and Democrats came together and said, you know, look, we're in the middle of this global pandemic. People shouldn't have to choose between their personal health and exercising their constitutional right to vote. Things have only gotten worse in Indiana. For me, I do not understand why we wouldn't allow non-excuse absentee balloting for the general election also. We're seeing dramatic turnout in early voting, people asking for absentees. We shouldn't make people have to violate the law in order to vote absentee because they don't want to jeopardize and choose between their personal health and exercising their constitutional right to vote. We should make it easy for people to vote. I mean, there's no record, there's no evidence that there's any fraud involved. Why wouldn't we make it convenient for folks to vote and participate in this democracy?
The other side's going to say that we have seen cases, albeit not as many as some people say, but there have been cases of voter fraud across the country. Your response? Well,
I trust our local elected officials, who are the ones that are going to conduct the elections in every county, Democrats and Republicans, that they are going to make sure that the law is followed, and I trust the work that they do. And there was no evidence and no suggestion, even from our Secretary of State, that there was any fraud in the primary election, where obviously there weren't any limitations on who could vote absentee.
I'm almost out of time. If elected, what's the first thing you would do in office?
First thing I would do is pull Indiana out of the Affordable Care Act, out of the lawsuit that Curtis Hill has filed, that Todd Rokita supports. We're also going to take a look at the virtual charter schools that have artificially inflated enrollment. They have swindled about $68 to $70 million of our tax money. I have seen the current administration do absolutely nothing about it. Haven't heard a word from Curtis Hill. And that's one of the first things I will do, is make sure that we're clawing back the money and referring these folks for criminal prosecution if warranted.
Jonathan Weinzapfel, thank you very much for being here, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
And next Sunday, Republican Attorney General candidate Todd Rokita will join us on All Indiana Politics on Wish TV and our statewide news network. And welcome back to All Indiana Politics on this Sunday morning as we welcome in two of Indiana's top political minds. Kip Tu is a former chairman of the Indiana Democratic Party, and Jennifer Hollowell is the former executive director of the Indiana Republican Party. We want to focus, guys, and thank you very much for being here, on the 5th District congressional race. Kip, we'll start with you. This is a seat that Democrats have been targeting since the moment Susan Brooks announced her retirement. How confident are you here going into the election?
Well, we've never held this district, at least as long as I've been around in politics in Indiana, so we have to be cautious about what could happen here. But I feel very confident. I think Christina Hale has run a very, very good campaign. She's outraised Sparks by almost 2-to-1 in the last quarter. Her television advertising is focused on health care and the pandemic, whereas Sparks' campaign seems to be a little bit more scattershot. They don't seem to have been able to focus on one particular message. Most of the negatives, two independent, news organizations have basically debunked the negatives that Sparks is running against Christina Hale. So I think the metrics of this race definitely favor Christina Hale, and I think that she's going to be elected.
Your response, Jennifer?
Well, first, I will say this is an incredibly competitive district, and it has trended that way over the last few years. Senator Donnelly actually bested Mike Braun just by a little bit in this district. So it is competitive, and it's especially one of these places where we see some of these suburban areas are trending a little bit more blue. So I think for Republicans, the main thing is we can't take this for granted. This is not a safe seat anymore. This is a toss-up, and so we need folks to turn out. This also has become a very nationalized race. You see obviously nonstop ads on both sides, and I think when it's all said and done, there's probably going to be $15 to $17 million spent just on this congressional district by candidates and all the outside money that's coming in. That's a gubernatorial campaign kind of budget, and not even get any close to that. So anyway, I think it's incredibly competitive, and Republicans need to turn out.
Since you brought up the national attention, let's turn the conversation there, Jennifer. This is a district that's watched to see how much support the president has from suburban women. Your thoughts?
Well, I sort of mentioned that. I mean, I do think that suburban areas are a little bit tougher for Republicans this year, and I also think it's a very nationalized race. I think where the president ends up being in this district is probably what ends up happening. It's going to be a real indicator, and certainly the president is strong across the state, but this district is a difficult one for us. And so for our candidate, Senator Victoria Sparks, they've got to finish strong, get their message out, and also make sure their voters turn out.
And Kip, you also hinted on how the significance of this race and how significant it would be for Democrats if they were to turn Hamilton County specifically from red to blue. What do you think how that will impact the national race?
Well, I think it's an important race nationally, obviously, but Democrats already control Congress. This would be a bigger deal for Indiana Democrats if we can turn this seat around, because we haven't had a whole bunch of good news recently. I think that Christina Hale is the best candidate we could have had for this district, and I think that it's an important indication for Indiana Democrats that we can compete in the state of Indiana.
One more quick question. I need a quick answer from both of you. Healthcare and Amy Coney Barrett, will those help Victoria Sparks or hurt her coming up here on Election Day? Jennifer? Well,
I definitely think help her. And Amy Coney Barrett, I mean, it was just incredible. And I think that has a lot of Republican voters fired up.
Kip?
Well, I think it actually hurts, because I think the message that the Supreme Court may overturn ACA in the time of a pandemic fills people with dread. There's no more important time for people to feel secure about their health care insurance, that it won't do a body blow to their family, and I don't see how it helps Republicans at this juncture.
All right, the race is on. Thank you very much for being here, both of you.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. We'll be right back. Big deadline for you if you plan to vote by mail and haven't done so yet. Thursday is the deadline to request a mail-in absentee ballot. You must get it back to the clerk's office by noon on Election Day to be counted. You can also vote early in person. We also have live coverage of two debates for you this week. The governor's race will be Tuesday at 7 o'clock live on Wish TV. Then Thursday, President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden for the final presidential debate of this campaign. That starts at 9 p.m. Well, thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics on this Sunday. You can also listen to us anytime by downloading the All Indiana Politics podcast. It's part of the All Indiana Podcast Network on wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.